Hello folks. In this video I'd like to offer my interpretation of the central themes of Odin's quest as related in the myth. This is just my opinion and I welcome discussion. It's a story at the core of paganism and I think it's an empowering and enlightening tale when demystified. Paganism is the path of personal enlightenment and the only religion which contains both the masculine and feminine principles. I think paganism will be the religion that leads the world out of the Kali-Yuga, and the sons of Thor will bring Baldr back to life in due course. Odin is one, so please see my post on Odin, Tew and Thor Demystified, which explains why I think Odin means one. Paganism is about personal spiritual development. We don't outsource our spirituality to other people, we take responsibility for it ourselves. So consider this. If Odin is one, then this is one's quest. And we use the word one in English to mean anyone and everyone. So this phrase equates to your quest. We must all walk the path of Odin to grow out of the childish, emotional ego mind into the adult mind of knowledge. And this is the great work of alchemy, to escape the prison of ideology and thus the wheel of incarnation and be truly liberated. It is to remove the sword of spirit from the clutches of the stone of matter, as the legendary English King Arthur did. It's the symbol of what it is to be British. At least in Britain it is. This is our true spirit. Odin's quest in the myth is described in Symbolism, and it's not as bad as it sounds. It does sound pretty bad, but it's just symbolic. So, Odin's single purpose, he's said to have thirsted for knowledge so much that he plucked out one of his own eyes, and he hung himself in the tree of life for 9 days. He wounded himself with a spear and fasted. In the first story, Odin wanted to drink from the well of Erd, which imparts knowledge of all things, and the price was one of his eyes. In the second story, his aim was to obtain the runes. They would allow him to know the true name of all things, and thus gain power over them. It gave him great magical power to heal, protect, bind, and even wake the dead. But the implication is that the runes are science and not magic. Finding the runes would, by my understanding, mean finding the correct place in the universal plan for all the basic vocal sounds used in language, and finding the correct written symbol for each as well. They could not be arbitrary assignments. This would have to be the universal perfect language, and thus the true original common language of all creation, which all things would understand. And so in theory anyway, he could talk to all the spirits of nature directly. That would be the point of it, and thus do magic. The symbolism of the removal of the eye, as I mentioned a couple of posts back, is that he became single-focused. It symbolises the personal sacrifice to complete dedication to the noble cause of knowledge and liberation from the wheel, which is probably the same as entry to Valhalla, where you sit at Odin's table and are beside God, i.e. in paradise. And note, Valhalla is usually translated as Hall of the Fallen, because Val is fall, but I think this misses the spirit of the word because it's the same root in valiant and valour and valid, so I think it denotes the valiant. It's the valiant fallen. Yeah, that's my opinion anyway. Generally, the one-eyed symbolism means total focus and dedication to a single purpose. So, that's what it means on the older Illuminati thing as well. The single eye is the single I, the undivided consciousness. It's God, it's the All-Father, it's one. Perhaps he gave up his left eye, symbolising that he could no longer see evil. That's another bit of symbolism, perhaps. Well, Jesus said, if your eye causes you to sin, you should pluck it out. And he also said, the light of the body is the eye. If your eye be single, your whole body shall be full of light. So, is it a coincidence that Jesus said this? Was he speaking literally? Or was this Jesus attempting to explain Odinism to his countrymen? Yeah, and that is kind of my reading of the story of Jesus, is that he was trying to bring paganism and the common law to the Jews. Symbolism and abstract thinking is kind of an important concept, because all religious texts and stories of all religions were written by people who understood symbolism and abstract thinking, and that they used it, they employed it, and encoded their messages in the stories. So to understand them, you have to see them in this light. They're not literal truths, but symbolic ones. And they often refer to abstract concepts, such as God is truth and Christ is logic. In the Golden Age, nothing needed to be written down, because people lived a long time, they were extremely intelligent, and they had phenomenal memories. Writing is a very difficult way of conveying information. It's prone to misunderstanding, and there's no opportunity to ask questions. It's very clumsy. So people back then, preferred to speak because it's much clearer. But as the seasons turned, the sages of old realised that the Kali-Yuga was upon them, and people were losing the ability to attain the yang mind of independent thought, and the light of day, Baldr, was leaving the minds of men. They wanted to transmit the truth to the future generations like us, who would be desperately trying to find it in a world of darkness, as the world emerged from the terrors of the Kali-Yuga, which we could consider the winter of the long year. That's what it is. But they couldn't transmit those truths directly, because people wouldn't have the right mind to understand them. They'd be misunderstood and or destroyed. And so the only way they could do it was to hide them in children's stories. So people are born with the yin mind of the child, which only understands literal things, but it takes great pride in remembering things accurately. It loves stories and fiction, but it hates deep truth. So the sages wrote many long and complex stories of many varied gods and goddesses, steeped in hidden meaning and symbolism, to be told to the children, which includes the adults in the Kali-Yuga, and repeated over the generations. They knew that even the most intelligent of the evil rulers that the world would produce would never be able to understand the true message of those stories, and so they would never realise the truth they contained, and would most likely just ignore them. And if they did become changed, the editors wouldn't know which parts to change to achieve their evil purpose, because the meaning was obscure to them. This is because yin does not understand yang. And so is a parable, the heirloom. So I suggest this is how we should view the old stories. Imagine you inherited a small statue of a king from your grandfather, intricately carved, beautiful to look at, with inspiring workmanship, and you treasure it, and you pass it on to your son, and he passes it on, and so on for many generations. And then one day, a child of the family takes the prized heirloom and smashes it into many pieces on the floor, and the family look on aghast at the loss of the ancient statue, ready to punish the child. But among the broken pieces of the statue, they see a diamond, larger than any they'd ever seen before. So, before the breakage, the statue was worth quite a lot. It was a prized antique, but the gemstone it contained, within, could buy paradise. Odin and the four elements. So the old stories aren't to be taken literally, but as allegory. So here's a personal example of how I perceive the archetypes of the following story in my own life. The story of Odin hanging on Yggdrasil, the world's tree, for 9 days, and wounding himself with a spear and fasting. It sounds awful, but it's metaphorically similar to what I've been doing, and it really isn't that bad. I quite enjoy it. So fasting. I fast from the world as a hermit in nature, literally in the middle of nowhere. I go out as little as possible. I don't really watch TV or listen to music. I have trees and wildlife. I have chickens. Chickens are great. If you're in any doubts, you should get some. It's peaceful, and I like it. I'm not particularly interested in what I eat, what I wear, or what I look like. That's boring kind of stuff. There's much more interesting things to think about. But it's important to exercise, however old you are. Odin wounded himself by sticking a spear in his own side. And why would he do that? Well, here's a possible answer. A spear pierces. You could say truth is like a penetrating spear, and logic is like a dividing sword. Facts don't divide, necessarily, but they do penetrate the mind. They are yang to us and fertilise our consciousness with information. So, yeah, that yang symbolism there with the spear. How we then interpret it is logic, and it's a separate process. The lower part of the body probably represents the lower self, the ego, the animal mind, or what I call the yin mind. What truth could Odin have penetrated his mind with in order to wound his lower self? Well, perhaps the simple truth that his ego was not him. Simply that. It seems to me that that is the first lesson on the spiritual path, to realise that your ego, your emotions, your bodily urges and thoughts are not you. All those things will be lost at death or reincarnation, because they are the elements of earth, which is body, water, which is emotion, and air, which is thought, and they all contain yin, which is death in this context. So that's why they don't survive death. The only thing that can be passed between incarnations is your will, your desire, the fire element, because it's the only element that contains no yin. It's yang-yang, so it can't be touched by death. I've been consciously training myself to crush my ego. It's taken a bit of effort. I was very narcissistic before. I grew up in a narcissistic family. It's very common these days, but it makes you foolish, and defending your ego is dishonourable. the first thing you have to do to control your ego is to be able to name all of the emotions and feelings you have. In other words, to break a spell, you have to name it. That's what it means. You have to be able to observe and name your emotions, because then you separate yourself from them. You become the observer, and they're the observed. Then you can see that they're not you. Your feelings and emotions aren't the real you. You are the observer. They're something else. And this leads us into ego death. And here's a simple experiment that might work for you. If you close your eyes and see if you can locate where you are in your body, you can ask yourself, am I above or below my eyes? Am I above or below the top of my head? That sort of thing. And you'll probably find that your consciousness is roughly located where the pineal gland is. It's in the centre of your brain, essentially. So you're the observer. Your body is a vehicle and you're along for the ride. You might as well imagine yourself as being a tiny creature perched in a chair driving yourself from your pineal gland. Your body's a vehicle and you're along for the ride. Everything you experience is the not you by definition. So the things you experience are not you by definition. They're the observed. It just feels like it's you because your sword, which is your spirit, is stuck in the stone of matter. And this is the essential power of illusion of the goddess, to make it all seem real. And, doesn't she do a good job? And isn't she beautiful? You have to kill the ego first because it's a false image of you. And so it's the only thing that actually stands in the way of you remembering who you really are and where you came from. It is your personal Satan, your adversary who God put there so you can learn how to defeat it and return home. That's the only reason why evil exists. It's there to be overcome. And how else would you learn to be good? And learning is sometimes forgetting. Forgetting who you think you are. That's the ego. You're not a mortal human. You only appear to be. To remember who you are, you have to forget who you think you are. The false self has to die. Hanging. I've spent years, not yet 9 though, hanging on the tree of life, i.e. contemplating God, the Tao and the 4 elements, which are the tree of life, and to the exclusion of much of a social life, which I don't really miss. It's not literally hanging around with a rope. It's hanging in the sense of to hang on to every word, to listen attentively, to be hanging around waiting for that important phone call from the person you love. When you hang on to something, you're making yourself yin to it. You're being supported by it, you're dependent on it, and you're not going anywhere. It's submission, in this case, to God, or truth. The weather during Odin's period on the tree was reportedly windy. And wind, which is air, symbolises the law, because it pushes in a single direction and you can't see it. He was open to the elements, subject to the wind, which means, or symbolically means, he was a servant to the law, who was being blown around by the law. And the Odin eye, which means the one eye, you'll be pleased to know there's no actual physical removal of body parts necessary. I've metaphorically, and not literally, plucked out one of my eyes. It just means to become focused on a single thing. In this case, the whole truth. To go beyond ideology to knowledge. I could have done it to focus on becoming rich, but my heart just wasn't really in that. Everything else seems really pretty dull and boring to me these days. The great work is a path with the heart. It gives a lot back, and I've no regrets. Truth is yang, and yang is one. It can't be divided. If you divide truth, you have lies. Partial truth is no truth at all. No one can serve 2 masters. The avatar. So, Odin is God, and when incarnated is the realised man, the Christ, Krishna. Krishna in Hinduism was worshipped as the 8th avatar of the god Vishnu, and also as the supreme god in his own right. So it's kind of Christ-like, These are all avatars of the prime creator in flesh. So Odin is the hero who sacrifices himself for a higher purpose. Odin is truth, reason, science, free will, and ego death. This archetype is available for any human being to embody, if they so choose. It's not limited or restricted to any special people, as the Christians claim. Anyone can choose it because we have free will. To be fair, it's not only the Christians, I think all the Abrahamics believe that. Anyway, that's probably the only real choice that humans have, which archetype to embody. We can't invent a new archetype to be, we can only choose from the predefined ones. It's allegiance to which god or principle or ideology, just as people choose an ideology, they don't tend to invent them. So Odin is both the All-Father, he's one, and he's the Son, logic. He's the God and the God incarnated as man, which any man could embody. And this was the original pagan vision that I suspect Christianity was based on, only they excluded everyone with the story that Jesus was special and not just an ordinary man. Please see my post on was Jesus special for my thoughts on that. So in summary, this is your quest. Odin's quest is your quest. It's our quest. We all have to do this at some time. You can put it off until your next lifetime, but do you really want to have to go through all the trials of early life again? The path to freedom may not be so easily available in the future, in your next life. The world really needs more people with genuine virtue and valour today. Next lifetime may be too late. And there's no honour in failing Odin's test, or in being a baby again, Paganism is about honour and virtue, at least for me, and I'd hate to have to be reincarnated again, and have to be a baby, and have to learn all that stuff again. It took me ages. I'd prefer to sit at Odin's table instead, but it's up to me to be worthy, Unfortunately, you can't buy indulgences in paganism, unlike the climate change religion, where you can buy carbon credits. Maybe I should convert. Anyway, there's my thoughts, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time. Take care.